Hello, this is Melissa Ryan, and I have a guest today, Erica Bonser.
Hello.
Say hello, Erica. And today we're joining you in a park just a few blocks from my office. It's a beautiful day here in Golden, as it often is in Colorado. And today I've been doing these Facebook Lives, and as I mentioned in my last interview yesterday with Duke Roomley, the reason I've been doing them is I work as a relationship counselor, so I work with romantic partners and I also work with individuals. And through my work, I just get to meet amazing people through just the collaborations I've done and the groups I'm a part of. Erica is one of the many amazing people that I have met through networking here in Golden. And I just find that the work other people are doing really intersects and complements the work that I do. And that brings me to why Erica is here today, in that with the couples work that I do, work is a big part of people's lives, and it comes up often because we spend, in general, most Americans spend the majority of time at work, and so their work relationships, the hours they keep, that all impacts their impersonal life. And so I'm going to go ahead and have Erica introduce herself and talk about the work she does and how it intersects with the work I do.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Erica Bonser. I am the owner of Cut the Fluff Coaching and Consulting. And I love people. That is my main passion. So I go into organizations from a more business strategy consultant, but also on the human capital side of things. So I love going into organizations to work with team members and leadership groups to have a bigger conversation around how are they treating their people. I believe that who you are outside of work doesn't change when you come to work. So the traditional theory of leaving life at the door when you enter is just not realistic. And that how you do everything is how you do anything. Mm-hmm. So how you communicate with your loved one or your partner at home or with your kids or with, how you treat
your animals,
the people, at the coffee shop making you your coffee, is how you will interact with those on your team. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of power in knowing that and knowing your habits.
Yeah. So
that you can make choices that will positively impact your team.
So if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is the theory, the old adage that we can compartmentalize ourselves, that's not really true.
Nope.
And you and I just recently attended a presentation where we learned, and this has come across my desk before, which is this idea that most of what makes up our thoughts and most of our experiences is all pretty much subconscious.
Yeah.
Somewhere around 90 to 95%. And so knowing that means it's very difficult to compartmentalize what is subconscious because we don't have much say in that, right?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is what could be happening, let's say in the limbic system or our emotional brain, what's happening emotionally, right? That's going to carry forward no matter how much effort we put to try to stop that coming forward. It's going to show up because that's majority of like what's our brain activity is like, right?
And we're emotional beings. And I think when you step into the workplace, the expectation traditionally is that there is no place or room for emotion in business. That business is business 100% of the time. And that is just not true. So when, I like to look at business and leadership specifically through the lens of mental health. Mm-hmm. So, putting both of us together is really special because I find that the best leaders are those that are able to understand the motives and the why behind their behaviors and how they interact with others. Their subconscious way
leadership. Of being, right? Yeah. Yes. Because what ultimately comes through, and there's a really great talk we actually read this for book club, The Charisma Myth. Did you read that one?
I wasn't there for that one.
Well, that's a good one. And you can check out this talk by the author. But one of the things she talks about is it's really hard to control our subconscious, like nonverbals. Like it's much more easier to influence our values and beliefs and get those to shift. And that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Like really looking at what are our beliefs and values and seeing, do our actions align? Like usually what I find people gets people into trouble in the sense that like gets them seeking a counselor is they're looking at their actions and they're looking at their values, and those are not lining up. Like the way, they tell me, particularly since I work with romantic partners, they tell me like, I deeply care about this person, and I really love them, and then but the way that they talk to them, the way that they interact with them, that's not the vibe their partner's picking up on, and that's not the vibe I'm picking up on. So there's something that's happening that's incongruent. And do you see that in the teams and leaders you work with?
Absolutely. I mean, I think every leader that comes into that role, everyone's a leader to some capacity, but those specifically, say with a managerial title, they don't enter that role not loving people, because it'd be really hard to do that job if you didn't care about people to
some extent.
Let's hope. Because it's not about necessarily what you're doing, it's about who you're being. And because you care about people, like, how does that show up for you on the day-to-day when you're interacting? Are you playing into those stories that you have around certain people? If you know that Jennifer is always going to be late, or so-and-so asks a lot of questions, you see these patterns show up, and now you only manage them in a certain way, and to those stories that you've kind of put in place for them. And maybe that's just not how they need to be treated or how they need to be led. So, evaluating, coming back to, I really do care about people. And I want to be the best manager or best boss or best leader that I can for them to facilitate their growth and their happiness and have a really great environment.
And it seems to touch on something that I talk with my folks about, which is you cannot give what you do not have. And the idea that, like, one of the common metaphors in my field is, when you sit on a plane and they tell you about the emergency procedures and they tell you got to put your oxygen mask on first before you can put it on somebody else, right? And so would you say that that's also applicable with leaders and business owners, that if they're not doing self-care, if they're not working on their own personal development,
you can't do it.
Then it's very hard, because what you're talking about is, maybe they came into it and they have this love of people, and then the day-to-day grind and just always exerting themselves. Their to-do list. The other metaphor that I used with clients is like with a video game, you have a life bar. And then over the course of the day, things can drain that life bar, even if it's like not a negative thing. It could be like, I made this cake for somebody and it's going to be great and we're going to eat this cake. Like, doing that energetically, putting that out can, if we're not taking care of ourselves and making sure we replenish, if we're an introvert, that could be draining, right? And so, things throughout the day can drain us of our life bar. And if we're not having practices throughout the day, that could really take away from where we're at the end of the day. And if you're always operating in the red zone, which I tell my clients is like, right about before you're going to die in a video game, over time, it's no wonder that you're going to be exhausted. It's no wonder it's going to be hard to listen to somebody at work. And then that's going to translate at home, right? Because you're going to go home in the red zone as well. So both work and home life are going to feel the impacts of you being in the red zone all the time.
Yeah. And I think, you have to love yourself before you can love others. So, or understand yourself before you have the capacity to understand others. And where maybe it's a bit different. So in your family is your family. They can't just fire you or leave you and go find a different family. I mean, maybe in today's day and age with families, but the impact of not being able to really understand yourself and your why behind your behaviors and how you connect and communicate and listen and, how to be a good leader. If you aren't invested in that, then now your people are not invested in you. And it, more so, it's not people leaving organizations, it's people leading the bosses that they work for. And that, we don't need to say that there's financial impact on that on the day-to-day, and just people's overall happiness. And I think something that I've been really aware of is I help a lot of clients with the generational gap. People have a lot of biases around millennials or around, the generation before us did things so differently. And there is something about that new generation that's coming in, our generation, that really values having intentional conversations and having really thoughtful leadership within an organization to help shape culture and all those buzzwords. That's just, you have to invest in this kind of self-work if you want to have a really great business.
And this is not new. Like the concept of, like you and I were talking about, lots of people invest in consultants to help grow the business or strategic planners. People invest in executive coaching. Like all of that has been around. And there's been this concept of if you want to work towards mastery, that's been in existence, this idea of apprenticeship and all of that for a very long time. Well before the Industrial Revolution. And so this concept of having support and learning these skills isn't new. Yeah. It sounds like what we're talking about is that we're expanding what skills people are acquiring. So they're not just learning, there's that term hard and soft skills. I don't know if that, I would just say there are skills of like the technical work of like, I got to know how to use this spreadsheet. And then there's like the human capital or the connection, what makes humans humans. Mm-hmm. And as Brene Brown talked about, as we become more automated, it is our human side that's going to differentiate us.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's power in vulnerability, right? Because that's basically what we're talking about, especially when we get on the Brene Brown realm. Vulnerability in the workplace. What a beautiful gift to give your people, to show them that you're not this big, scary,
you're not a robot,
threatening robot,
that you're a human.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I love that she talked about in her newest book, Dare to Lead, was, a question that she's been asking because she's working in these executive, Fortune 100 companies, and she's working with the military. And something she always asks somebody is she invites them to give an example of where somebody was brave and not vulnerable. And because vulnerability really is leaving yourself what is most precious. Yes, you're exposing what is most precious to possible attack. That's literally what vulnerability is, right? And so, no one can ever give her an example of where bravery is being done and vulnerability isn't a part of that. Mm-hmm. So, I think we talked about inviting our folks to respond to a question. So what's your question for the audience today?
My question is, I want you to think about a time, could be any leader, boss, manager you've had from the first one to now, and what was one quality that you really respected in that leader, and how they showed up for you?
So,
we want to know.
We want to know. So answer, share. Again, this is about building community and helping people just see that, there's commonalities and, that there is it's helpful to see what other people are doing, and you can model that, right? If a lot of us are connected with many people, and like you said, we all, in some capacity, could be a leader.
Yeah. We're leaders in, it doesn't have to be in a work. You don't need a title and a promotion and a raise to justify that I'm a leader now. I'm a leader in my family. I'm a leader for the community of women that I surround myself with, for, anyone.
So another thing that I wanted to ask you about is, what are some tips or ways that you get leaders to start engaging in this work? And what are some things that some of our audience could start to do or move towards to really start to engage in what you're talking about?
Man, there's so many things that you can do. One big thing is I open the space for a really powerful, big conversation between the team members and the manager, where I have the leader step aside or come out of a room. So they're not a part of this process, and I have the whole team brainstorm on what are things that they really value and appreciate. Where do they see about this manager, of this individual? Where do they see them struggle the most? What do they wish for them? What are some feedback or opportunities that they see that this manager can really work on? And then we set an intention for that person, and then we bring them back in and enroll the manager in a really loving way, and then give them the space to speak more openly, more vulnerably. It's a really powerful tool. Mm-hmm. And if your team isn't going to do that, or maybe you work by yourself and your team is your family, I think understanding and reaching out and saying, I want to understand you better. So if you were my family, which maybe you are, a family member, I would ask, what are your love languages so that I can serve you in the way that you want to be served, or acknowledge you in the way you want to be acknowledged? How do you like to be communicated with? How do you like, just being an inquiry around this person that you care so deeply about so that you can show up for them in the best way possible. And then also being brave enough to ask for that in return. Mm-hmm. Here's how you can show up for me. Here are my boundaries. Here's what you can expect. Here's what I want you to hold me accountable to.
And so what I'm hearing a lot about is a lot of clarity and this just being very straightforward. And it also touches on that saying, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. You
don't know what you don't know.
No. And like we were talking about, you can't shift something you're not aware of, right? Yeah. And so a lot of times we're like, I have clients tell me, well, don't they know they do this? And I'm like, well, unlikely. If they knew they did that and the problems it causes in relationship or in their life, they probably wouldn't do it.
People have good intentions, and sometimes when there's a behavior that they are doing and it's not through best intentions, they obviously are not aware of the impact of that behavior. I've had to been called out several times. And I'm grateful every time it happens, even though it is a little uncomfortable, but that self-reflection, it's a good thing to have to sit with.
Yeah, it's a growth opportunity. It's a
gift,
right?
Yeah.
I always
feedback is a gift.
If you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing.
Yes.
So, because growth has it has this element of not being comfortable, right? And we know change. Just on a biological level, signals to the brain, this is uncomfortable, this doesn't feel great. And that's a good sign usually. Usually I say to folks, you're coming here because you don't like what's going on. So we don't want more of the same. And so discomfort is telling us something is shifting in your system. Something is changing in your behaviors. Yeah. And how great is that? Like, it might not feel good, and that's why you're in here, for support, so we can and that's the work you do, right? You're supporting, you're there to cheer them on and also challenge them.
Yeah. Change and comfort do not coexist.
No.
It's a good quote that I like. I have a question for you.
Okay.
Knowing the work that you do, I get a lot of pushback from organizations, corporate culture, managers saying that they don't either see value in this kind of work, or it's too much, it's a scary big thing that maybe we'll do it later. What would be your comeback to that, to really drive home and show that this is work that's important and is needed now?
Fortunately, there are people that have come before us that there's a lot of research.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
That demonstrates, I love not reinventing the wheel, as you know, and you probably are the same. And so fortunately, there's just so much research that shows that this kind of leadership and this work is effective. And in terms of employee retention, in terms of employee satisfaction, this isn't new. Stephen Covey talked about it, and other people before him have talked about if your employees are happy, your business will do well. So this isn't new concept. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People came out sometime in the 90s. And there's stuff that predates. And that book came out in the 50s. And it's talking about really listening to people and taking into their concerns and paying attention. And I'm not sure when we took the human being and the human part out of business or other leadership, because again, probably because we just recently read that book. But Brene Brown talks about a officer in the military who went back to a leadership training manual, the very first version, which came out post-World War II. And there was mention of love and fellowship and connection all throughout this manual. And she went back, and this was digital, so she could look at the current manual, and none of those words existed. Yeah. And they're reporting, the officer, the folks in the military are, we already know that there's high risk of suicide, high risk of depression, PTSD, loneliness, all these things that have surfaced. And we can't help but think, I can't help but think that if we're wired for connection, the neuroscience backs that this shift that we've had where we've taken the human, the heart out of work and in the military and very school, all kinds of areas.
Everywhere.
That it can't also have some correlation to what's happening on a bigger level.
Yeah. We got to put love back in business.
Back in business. Right? The love back in business. So I think that's a great way to wrap up our conversation. We're so glad we've had people kind of bounce in and out, and it's great to have you join us. Is there anything you want to leave us with that's coming up or to be aware of? We'll put in the comment section your business stuff.
I would say, going down the realm of personal and business development, I've created a program. It's called The Program. It is very similar to the 12 steps that you would go through maybe with AA, but it's tailored down to 6 steps, no fluff in my business. And it's a lot of work on yourself, so looking inside, understanding your why, and then it's partnered with a lot of really strategic, hard, business tools that you can implement right away to see some really big impact and shifts on your team.
Cool.
And if you are interested in that, I would love to talk to you.
Yeah, so Erica will be connected. We'll put her Facebook page in the comments, and please
I'm here
reach
in
out.
Golden. You can come
here
get
in
coffee.
Golden, have a cup of coffee. It's always delicious, and we're just really glad you joined us. So please stay tuned. I will be doing another Facebook Live later this week. Really talking. It's a trend this week. Who knew? All these wonderful people want to talk, but I will be talking with Mark Azole out of Louisville.
He's great.
He's awesome. Mm-hmm. He also does some business coaching stuff too, and he also works with men. So I believe that's what our conversation will be about, is just as a dude, what's the value in doing this thing called therapy, and what to look for in terms of how it helps you with leadership and mastery and the goals that you're trying to achieve in your life. So stay tuned for that. Thank you, Erica, for joining.
Thank you.
And we're glad you were here. Take care.